Tsujimoto and Brian Rademaker joining us here tonight. Um, so we're just gonna dive right in, guys. Welcome to the podcast. A lot to talk about this evening. A lot to to really dig into here. I guess the first thing that we should talk about is a lot of changes in terms of the divisional format. A lot of changes in terms of the cup style that we're doing this year. What are your guys' thoughts and takes on that as we enter the season here?
I would say, I mean, first and foremost for the cup format, because I think that's, the thing that's decided, at the meeting in the moment, and the fact that it's so different. Um, I don't really know how it's going to play out. It's such a new approach, just kind of being blindly drawn, with multiple teams, but playing them and also having a group setup. I, it's still dependent a lot on who you draw, and I don't think that changes from the previous format. I think the fact that you have multiple games and multiple games matter, and the fact that weekday games can usually be a whole spectrum of different setups for your team. um, I, I don't know if I like it or not yet. I think I would have to go through it once before I said whether or not I like it, but I think it's different and I think it's worth a try.
Brian?
Yeah, just to play off of that a little bit. First, I do like the fact that there's now a third cup. I think it makes a whole lot of sense to separate the teams in this way because I've kind of always felt that Division One and Division Two are a lot closer in skill set than they're made out to be, or the way that they were previously split. So I like the fact that that's now your Wood Cup makeup, and it gives also a chance for new teams to potentially hoist a cup down in the lower divisions. That might have been more of a stretch, I guess, under the Wood Cup when they were there. But as for the format, I'm looking forward to it because in a lot of ways, it's kind of the same thing. The only difference is, I guess, you do have potentially an out if you were to lose or you were to draw. I think more likely than not, you're going to have to go 2-0 in your little pod anyway. And after that, it becomes a straight bracket. It's kind of cool that you don't really know your path, I guess, yet. The fact that everything is going to be redrawn down the line, which is a nice little wrinkle. I just hope everybody sees it out. And what I mean by that is, I would hate to see early on some sort of 4-0 lopsided score, uh, you know, maybe discourage a team from showing up to their second game and really like skewing a potential group. If everybody can see it out, I really think this format is pretty neat. And at the least, it's an experiment. If it doesn't go as well as it looks on paper, then you can always scrap it and go back to a different method.
Yeah, I think the bracket format that we've had for the past couple of years has sort of kind of wore out its welcome, especially with the format being D1 and with Premier and Championship. Um, I mean, sure, there were maybe a handful of D1 teams who made a run here and there, but did they really ever truly have a shot at winning? Not really. And I've heard from other teams in the league say, like, they like the idea of playing teams different in the cup versus their league play. And at least this still gives you that, but it opens the door for more teams to have an opportunity to play more games with the extra guaranteed game, and to have a realistic shot at winning a cup tournament, winning a trophy in their respective division. It doesn't close the door on teams who want to play up. We allowed that this year. I don't think anyone took us up on that. But aside from that, I'm excited and looking forward to the cup format. I think the groups were really interesting. You guys both were there for the draw. Anything stand out to you in terms of a group that you liked and really wanted, or are looking forward to seeing how they play out in any of the three tournaments?
I wanted to respond to one thing that you said, and it's funny you mentioned the part about D1, having an opportunity but never really having a serious chance to win Teal Cup. Having lost to Raiders 10-0 and Sharpshooters 8-1 over the past 5 years, I can completely attest with what you're saying.
I mean,
No,
was it fun to play them? Maybe, but
not
you
at
pretty much
all.
knew the result before the game even began.
No one ever wants to lose like that. And like,
Right.
I guess when you're heading into the game, you're like, oh man, we got a chance to pull this upset. But then when you're, leaving after the game with your tail between your legs, like it's much less fun at that point.
From the people on the outside looking in, like say an upset were to occur like that, of course they love it, but they're not going to think twice about those games that you mentioned where you get, caved in. Like they just write that off, and the teams that are playing that's the worst scenario for them. So, yeah, it's kind of we're definitely aiming to avoid that with the format this year.
Mhm.
Um, Brian, in the groups, Teal, Matthews, Wood Cup, any of those groups you're really looking forward to maybe watching play out?
Yes, and both of them are in the Wood Cup.
Oh, okay.
I think we've got some interesting groups there. The one that I think most of us were talking about in the moment was the Rants group, I believe it is, with is it Soho perhaps and Willie's, or am I screwing that up? I'm
I'll
pretty sure Soho and Willie's are together.
I'll pull up the. This is Wood Cup, right? That you're talking about?
Yep.
Yep, the Wood Cup
Yep.
draw right here
Group
for
E.
everyone. We have Soho, Rants, and Willie's. That's one group. And what was the second one you were talking about?
Oh, I
Maybe.
haven't gotten there yet.
Oh,
No,
So
okay.
the
Go
it's
ahead.
first
just Group
the
B, and
first group,
that is a good one. In fact, I agree.
Yeah.
yeah, that one I think is really intriguing. I mean, you've got a team there that's been around for ages with a lot of history, a lot of solid players, obviously. Um, and I'm really interested to see how they play against Rants. Rants, I think, is going to surprise a lot of people. Maybe not. By that, I think there's a lot of quality on that team. So I do think they're going to do well this year. And then there's Willie's, who have been part of a topic of conversation right now where, did they drop too many divisions? I personally don't really think so. I think they probably belong in either the bottom of championship or the top of Division One. But either way, I think, they're a threat to come out of that group, but it's not going to be easy. So any one of those three teams could possibly top that group, and it wouldn't really surprise me. The other group I'm really excited to see, and I guess it's more top heavy in that there's a third team in there that unfortunately I feel like is meaningless. Is the Kilimanjaro Bandits group with FC Lackawanna. I think that one is going to be a great game. I'm pretty sure that fixture is the last of the three within that rotation. So sometime in mid to late June, I might even want to go take a look at that one because Bandits are playing a pretty stretched schedule here across two platforms, and I don't know if they come in there a little overconfident. I think they walk away losers of the group.
Yeah, I think those two are probably the ones I liked a lot too. The last one I would just make a mention of was you have your two Wood Cup finalists in the same group draw with Revs and Great White Buffalo. Southern Tier, I believe, is the third team to round that one out. And that, I mean, those are three good teams drawn together in that one. Some very intriguing matchups in the Wood Cup draw for sure. Ben, anything you liked out of the group stages there in the cup tournaments?
Yeah, you know what I don't want to do on a Thursday is drive to Fredonia to play Southern Tier. So I know we mentioned those two Wood Cup finalists, but there's a slight advantage in this case. When do you leave work? When do you get there? Yeah, there's questions. So
Well,
I
I
mean,
think I think you're forgetting a key component of the cups here, Ben, is that we changed it this year, so all the games are on league fields. Um,
oh,
there's no travel for any of these games. I mean, there's travel in the sense that maybe Southern Tier's got to come up, the Olean's got to come up, AC Elite has to come up, but all of the rest of the games are all played on league grand fields. And the change there was all the teams now have to pay for the refs, and the league now pays for the fields. So,
got it. Well, forget Southern Tier then.
the one other group I would want to bring up here is in Premier, of course, our favorite BSA Raiders and the Amherst Sharpshooters get drawn together. and they got, in my mind, we'll talk about it eventually here in the previews. They got, in my mind, maybe the best team out of championship in Buffalo Italia. So that group, for me, is probably the strongest one in teal. I don't know if you guys had a chance to glance over those ones. Any ones in there stand out to you?
One jumps out to me, and Brian will obviously be able to chime in on this. But the fact that three premier teams with Inter, Olean, and Queenston get drawn in the same group, I think that's kind of interesting, and I think that'll force those teams to show up with good numbers and a quality squad in those games. But as the person who ended up drawing the Sharpshooters and Raiders in the same group, I've kind of battled my not really my conscience, but I just kind of felt weird about it because in those blind draws before when it was D1 championship and premier and like those two being pitted against each other really early in a lot of cases in the past, it's just funny that there's less volatility in this draw and they still get put together. I don't necessarily think that's good for the tournament. I just think it's kind of funny, honestly, and how it worked out. Um,
That's
but
interesting. Why don't you think that it? Do you think it's bad for the tournament?
I just think you want to see the best teams playing each other later on. And I think regardless of whatever tournament you have, regardless of what sport it is, you want to see the better teams playing later on. But I understand from why this is set up, why just it creates scenarios like this that make it more interesting. Granted, you don't necessarily end up with the best teams playing each other later on, which is okay. But I mean, the fact that Buffalo Italia gets drawn with these two. Buffalo Italia is a good team, a young team, somebody, in 5 years that, is probably a premier team if they stick together. You could say that almost fairly comfortably. They don't, unless Raiders or Sharpshooters don't bring numbers to the game, I don't think it's even, a competition. And I respect Buffalo Italia a lot. I just think it's a tough draw for them.
For sure.
Um, and I know that both Raiders and Sharpshooters take the cup pretty seriously, just given that it gives you a berth if you do win the cup in an opportunity to play against teams, whether it is the Werner Fricker Cup, I believe, still. That it's cool to play those games to represent the BDSL, to do that stuff in a lot of cases before the BDSL season starts. So I would say that the tournament is important to those teams, and I think they will show up. And I think whichever team advances out of Group C, they'll feel pretty good about their chances the rest of the way.
Brian,
I'm going to
anything
say
to
something.
add? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to say something that makes me want to throw up in my mouth, and that's I feel bad for the Raiders because it seems like every year they get like in some sort of insanely tough pod that they've got to get out of. Whether it's Celtic United or Bus or now Amherst, even like I know the Willies took them out. I think somewhat surprisingly, obviously, but it seems like there was never an easy path for them, which I guess in some ways I don't feel bad about, but it's just funny to Ben's point, in a situation like this, no matter what happens, they seem to get put into a spot where it's going to be difficult to advance. I guess it just helps from a tune-up standpoint. You get your, better games out of the way first, and maybe it becomes a little bit easier along the way, but I think it's easier said than done regardless. But just to piggyback off of what Ben was talking about before about the all premier group, I believe the group that we're in is the only one that's three premier teams. It's not an easy group, but there's also, I wouldn't say any super heavy hitters in it as well. So it's really difficult to say how that's going to play out. Inter's a strong team. We're going to see them multiple times this year, beginning as soon as this Monday. So getting them multiple times, I think, will only make that particular fixture even more difficult. Olean is an interesting one because honestly, I don't know how well they'll travel, or I don't really even know their full makeup of their team now. Are they mostly based out of Olean these days, or do they have a couple guys who are local that can actually bridge that gap a little bit and make sure that they have numbers? So we'll see.
I mean, we're talking about Teal Cup and the Raiders there, so let's kind of stick with that. Obviously, last season with the Raiders was kind of a big roller coaster ride, a very, very disappointing and pretty much unheard of start for them. They were able to claw back, regain their kind of composure, and once again finish out the season atop the Premier League. This season, I mean, the gap seems to be closing every single year between the Raiders and the rest of the pack. Um, rosters now, you guys have maybe had a chance to see them. Do we think that gap continues to narrow? In my mind, there's maybe four, maybe five teams who all have a shot now at really competing with the Raiders on a week-to-week basis. That said, I did like a lot of the moves Raiders made this year. They didn't necessarily get younger, but they added to that sort of core base of experienced high-level college players. So where do you guys see the Raiders and the rest of the pack here in the Premier Division?
So the rumblings regarding Raiders right now is that this is their last run, for greatness. And you can look at some of the names on the roster and see that, like, yeah, that's believably the case. You have some people in their early 30s or a little bit later on. And I'm looking at the roster right now, just from Casey Durkis, John Grabowski, Anthony Johnson. There's Dan Panero, Kyle Rogers. You can keep going on. Andy Teat, Evan Walsh, Kyle Westerholt. A lot of players who very talented, but obviously maybe towards the end of their time in Premier to be really big time contributors. So I think this is like, I don't want to say it's their last go, but it's probably one of their last goes. Usually sometimes somebody will say it's their last go and then they come back the following year and then it's their last go and so forth. But I mean, looking down the list, Raiders, very strong. Their FC Buffalo connections are very important. You see this team get better as the season goes on. Usually you'll be like, oh man, it's mid July. They just added two guys to their roster who completely changed the complexion of the team. Matt Contino last year, Andy Teat last year. These guys made massive differences in the championship game in situations like that, and were contributors most of the year, like Mahmoud Kita, who just scored twice in the USASA Amateur Cup game for Raiders. He's a guy who came on late at the end of last year and makes a huge difference. So to look at Raiders roster now and then look at it again in July, I think, Raiders will get better. They'll be there. They'll be in the playoffs. They're the favorite. It's a broken record, but they do it year after year, so you have to respect it, I guess.
Yeah, I respect it, and I see a little bit more of the same. Well, and on top of those aging players, obviously the quality is there. They're also surrounded by some key exceptional players. I mean, you talk about guys like Colin O'Keefe comes to mind like immediately, and now I think they just grabbed the FC Buffalo Mercyhurst guy. Elliott, I believe, is now on
Yeah.
this roster too.
Yep.
So like I'm sure that's just an extra punch, up top to score. So I the safe bet is to just say that they'll probably end up in the championship game. Whether or not they'll win it, who knows? I mean, it's 90 minutes, anything could happen. I think there's enough talent in the division now that week to week they're more vulnerable. But ultimately, I think they're going to finish somewhere within the top six. And if that's the case, then they have to be the favorite come mid-August.
And
Um,
I want to address this to both of you guys because I kind of want to hear Schieber's opinion. Is like,
sure.
who is the chief challenger to Raiders this year? I mean, I think Raiders, given their history and the fact that I think we all consider them the favorite just because we kind of have to given their pedigree. Who is the one team that if you're Raiders in the final, you're like, I don't want to face that team, if I can help it.
Man, for me, it. I would say bus, but I just have a feeling like if they get there to the final, we want to talk about rosters being made up of FC Buffalo guys. Like Bus has a heavy contingency of those players, and they tend to be the ones who are not local. So generally speaking, Bus maybe has more of a situation where the guys there when FC Buffalo season ends, like that might be it for them. And are they going to stick around and finish it out with Bus? I hesitate a little bit to say that. So on paper, it's maybe Bus. I mean, I always go back to I know it's weird, but like Celtic United just seem to give Raiders like fits at times. Sort of emblematic of their of Celtic United as a whole. Like they're just a team that to me, always should do better than what they actually produce out on the field. I love that roster. A lot of very talented players, mostly younger guys, still with a lot left in the tank for BDSL play. Um, but for me, it's got to be Amherst. They run into a similar problem with Bus where they have younger guys who might have to go back to college at the end of the year. But they have the best history in it. They are the ones who have done it most recently, the most often, I guess. So in my mind, it's probably Amherst, but I would give maybe a second nod to Celtic U. Brian, I know I'm kind of discounting Queenston, but stylistically, you guys, in my mind, are just not a great match. You guys want to play defense and absorb it, and Raiders want to hold on to the ball and attack. And uh, I watched the final last year, and you guys did a fantastic job of keeping them off your backs for a long period of time. But I just think the Raiders' relentlessness with the ball and pushing, towards the net is hard to really have your style of play, I guess, be a true threat in my mind at least.
Yeah, they were. So for starters, they were awesome that
Hmm.
night. Um, I know we scored really early, but aside from that, I don't really think we got a nice look for the rest of the game, and they just kept the ball at will. I will say we did beat them 5-0 last
You
year,
did, you
so
did.
hold up. I mean, stylistically, maybe we're just okay, but no, honestly, you took actually uh, the team from me that I thought you wouldn't say, and it was Celtic United.
Oh,
They almost beat them last year in the playoffs. I think that went deep into penalty kicks before Raiders prevailed. They've always given problems, and I think to your point, your bus point, which I think is valid, um, is the same is actually the reverse issue that Celtic United has. They've got players who played who are now out of college. I think their commitment is more to the United team than elsewhere, and they're good enough. So they're all going to be there. Their main contributors should be available to play. So if that team were to avoid Raiders leading up to the championship game, they could, make a realistic run there. And then the rest of it comes down to, I think, just matchups. I mean, there's certain teams, everybody seems to have better matchups than others. I can tell you firsthand, we can't beat Celtic United. It's almost impossible. But at the same time, then anytime we see Amherst on the schedule, especially in the past few years, we usually win that game, and it's just based on like how the teams match up well against one another. So it becomes a little bit of a crapshoot there on things that are hard to understand. And I think the thing is, the top half of Premier, I think, all got better on paper. We'll just have to see how it plays out, when everybody plays together. But I guess since we're talking about Premier right now, I will say a team that I think could surprise this year is Wolves. They've got the right pieces from Clarence. They've got a good young core. Renkus did a really good job putting that group together. Good players, good dudes. That's a team that I also hope does well. Regardless, but I think they will do well.
I think the one thing I would say about Wolves that they do great is Andy, their manager, does a great job picking through the free agent board the last couple of years and like finding gold in there. This year he added a couple of Madai recruits from the board. Last year it was Sam Wilson, who was essentially a game changer, facing them and watching them play in championship last year. He was just an incredible player that they scooped up out of nowhere. But yeah, I think Wolves is maybe a dark horse. I kind of agree with you there. I think they are definitely a playoff contender in the bottom half. Your 4, 5, 6 spots. And could they pull the upset? I don't know if they're quite there yet. But they certainly have built a very respectable roster from Premier. I think they'll do much better in the top flight this time around versus last. Um, One last team I think I'd want to touch on, maybe here in Premier specifically, would be what are your guys' thoughts on the changes here ongoing with Lackawanna? It's kind of last year was probably a disappointing year for them. They came into the season with a lot of high hopes and expectations. Out of the gate, they beat Raiders week one. And then after that, it was just basically a slog for them. Really struggled to find their footing. Really couldn't score goals. It was just a rough rest of the regular season for them. Looking at what they have on paper this year, and of course they have the split season for them. Uh, do you think it plays out similarly this year? Should we just not expect that much out of Lackawanna this year? Where do you guys land on them?
I don't want to speak out of turn necessarily, but I think I foresee the same thing happening as last year. I mean, I think they're Brian's out for this one.
I've
I
had
think
enough. I can't do this.
I I think their priority and is probably the UPSL. I think there's a little bit greater exposure and a little bit more regional in terms of that. And I think they're pretty invested in really doing well in that league. And I think that's fine. I think it's cool that they're still putting a team in the BDSL, but I think as the season goes on, managing your roster, keeping a bigger player pool interested and invested and making sure like, yeah, we got these 20 guys who are going to play in the UPSL, but we also got these guys who are going to be healthy, interested, and ready to play in the BDSL. That's hard. That's it, and you end up in difficult situations, and that's a challenge that they're going to continue to face, and I hope a challenge that they get better at. I mean, the first year, like you said, was rough. It was. I don't think they finished where they wanted to finish in the BDSL. But I think as they just get more accustomed to it and get greater buy-in. If you look down their BDSL roster right now, there's a decent amount of turnover from the names that they had last year, and I think
For sure.
in a way that's a good thing as long as that player pool that they're counting on for UPSL, which they might have a Saturday game followed by a day after game BDSL, they have enough changeover where you have a couple fresh guys, five fresh guys maybe, and then nine or 10 other guys who played the day before but are good enough to still compete. It doesn't take a ton to do it, but to have people bought in, I think is the real challenge. And this year might be different, but it might not, and I don't know. And I'm a maybe naturally a skeptic, so
Sure.
that's me.
I think
And
it's
yeah,
totally reasonable.
it's maybe because I'm 38, it's a little bit differently, but I'm thinking if I have a game on Saturday night followed by a game on Sunday night, I probably can't play. I can only imagine some of these guys at a high level who tweak a hammy or do something else, just to make you a little off that might make you want to sit on the game that matters least to you. It could be the BDSL game. So if they don't have the depth across both, then I think they'll struggle in both, actually. And so I actually think they're going to be fighting off relegation this year. And it's not really because of, it really has nothing to do with their talent. I think it has more to do with the talent elsewhere. I think the talent elsewhere will pounce on them if they, view this league secondary. And again, that's completely up to them. So I just have a feeling that if they're going to put it second mentally, you might show up and get a surprise loss in their mind, and that could snowball as the year progresses.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. The one thing I just wonder is if they learned from that experience. It seemed like at least the roster they're constructing, as Ben pointed out, there's enough difference probably between that and what they're going to carry on the other side that maybe it doesn't play out quite the same way. They still have some top end players, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see how that plays out for Lackawanna. Let's move on to the championship division. I saw a lot of talk actually online the last couple days where people have been calling this, they think, the most competitive and equally balanced division in BDSL this year. My team's in it. I'll be honest, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that take. So I'm interested to see what you guys think on it. You could talk about any team or the competitive level. What do you guys think about championship this year?
I can start on this one, Ben, if you don't mind. So, competitiveness, yes, I think that that'll be there because I don't think you could show up this year in that division and just like automatically check mark off a win with very few. Uh, there's a few teams perhaps that might be struggling, but after that, I think you've got a cluster of teams that can all compete with one another. Best ever, like skill wise, I don't think so. I think we saw that maybe 5 or 6 years ago. There were a handful of teams, maybe five or six, that are now in Premier that were there 5 or 6 years ago. So it's hard to say that, at least for now. I mean, maybe the roadmap of the league 6 years from now is very championship heavy in Premier. Who knows? But that might be a little bit too soon to say that. But I do think there are really no favorites this year. Like I can't look. I'm looking right now at the division. Um, I don't see anybody who like stands out to me personally that I can guarantee right now in late April and say I'm really confident that they're going to make the final.
I like the wide open nature of it, honestly, and I think there is a ton of parity, and that I don't think there's much parity in the Premier Division, and I think all the parity is here. I think there's a very clear top half in Premier and a clear bottom half. Here, I don't think there's either of those. There's a lot of teams that I think could do really well. I think Buffalo Italia is a rising team. I think New York Elite is a rising team. I think the remade Ruse team is going to be a contender. I also don't want to be the team that counts out somebody like NMB, who has a track record of doing pretty well. I think it's pretty wide open. I think Cavalucci Marini, projecting. I think it was BDSL rumors. I think like the 1 to 9 was just I don't know how you choose those, and I think it is wide open, and I think it's a good kind of wide open. I don't think the talent level is low. I think there's just a lot of different variables that could change where these teams go, honestly. And I wish I could be like, oh yeah, this team's definitely going to be one. This team's definitely going to be two. I still think ultimately the bees have the most talent. I don't know how well they'll come together this year. They look a lot different than they did last year, and they made a run in Teal Cup last year. They were a team that I think that a lot of people thought were going to be a Premier Division team in short order, and maybe they still will be. But a lot of new names and just a different season where they need to prove themselves. But it is wide open. I think if I had to pick a team to win it all right now, it would probably be bees.
I mean, it seems like you guys both agree that at least in terms of the playoffs and the teams fighting for those positions, there's no real clear-cut favorite or no one that stands out. Maybe is there something at the bottom end of the table where you think like there's an obvious group of teams? Maybe it's one clear-cut team. Maybe we start there and work our way up.
Yeah, I think Polonia Legacy, the team that got pulled up. Um, so I guess I'll put it this way. I'm not trying to, I'm just blunt. It's just the way I am. I think they would be fighting for a playoff spot in Division One, and by that I mean I think they'd be fine. But I literally think they'd be somewhere around fifth or sixth in that division. And I guess that's more of a test to the top half of Division One. But I would start with them. I think their team isn't much improved from last year, so that could be part of the problem. Then after that, I think it gets tricky because I think the easy one to say, based on the fact that Rangers is now out of the division from last year, would have been West Side. But the more I look at that roster, I don't think it's that bad. It's older, but I think their style of play can keep them around. Maybe they can steal a couple wins. By no means do I really think they're going to be a threat to the playoffs, but at the same time, I feel like they'll be safe enough from relegation. More so because I don't feel Polonia will get too many points. Niagara finds themselves kind of down there, but they've got some decent pieces too. But I'd put them in the same group as Westside, I guess. And probably another team that I expect to be down there is actually Clarence. Now, they still have some tremendously talented players on that team, but it's been really wiped out. Most of those guys, or I should say, the guys that really contributed are now part of Wolves. The rest of them are contributors still that are solid enough. I just don't know if they have enough people around them to make them, what they were with those contributors that are now on Wolves. So they could struggle a little bit more. It's just an interesting dynamic looking at the the whole team makeup there. It's very strange to me. I don't know the connections, I guess, perhaps, but we'll see. But then after that, I feel like the rest of the teams are all kind of the same. I know I've seen a lot of chatter lately about Lycan United in terms of, you know, perhaps not even wanting to be in this division. But personally, if I really, really had to make a choice as to who would win this division at the year end, it would be them. I think they got better, perhaps, from last year. But I think everybody else caught up to them. The Bees look like they got wiped out initially. Now I'm kind of thinking they'll be okay, just given who they've replaced their losses with. Um, Italia is probably the best team coming up from Division One. Elite's probably right there. Elite's got probably some of the best ads of the season. I just have to see how that'll fit in with the rest of their core makeup. And then Ruse is an interesting one because I mean I honestly thought you guys were trending in the wrong direction until the past few weeks, where all of a sudden I got to look at the roster and heard some news about who was on this team, and suddenly like I think you guys can now hoist a trophy this year. So it's a testament to the fact that this whole league is wide open. I didn't mention Chupas because I don't really know what to say about them. They're either really good one year, or they're really underwhelming another year. So I'll just say they'll finish sixth or seventh.
5 Strangios, though. I think that's a record Strangio number.
Yeah,
And three Roccos, right?
3 Roccos. I didn't even know there were three. I knew there were two, but I didn't know there were three.
yeah.
Well, there could be more. Maybe there's seven, and we just haven't seen them come through the league yet.
No?
Yeah, I mean, championship as a team in it's always one of the most fun divisions to be in. I'm looking forward to the season this year. I think like you guys, it should be a good competition for the playoff spots. But we'll see. I have our first game this weekend against Italia, and for me and my club, I believe that'll be a good indicator on what we can expect out of ourselves going forward. I want to actually skip from championship. I want to go all the way down to over 35 because we saw a big explosion in the teams again. Before the season began, when we were first taking applications, we actually had very few for over 35, and I was really worried about the status of the division. And then towards the end of application season, we just got a bunch, and now over 35 looks maybe as competitive as ever, especially in the top end of it. Ben, you entered a team in it. Brian, I know you like paying attention down there in the over 35 division. A lot of those teams chose to play in the cup competitions. So I'm really interested to see what your guys' take is this year on the over 35 group. They removed the cap on championship players, which I believe was definitely the right call for the division to keep it growing in the right direction. There were some really good talented teams down there. Any thoughts on the over 35 just to kick it off?
You can go ahead, Brian.
Sure. Well, whoever the manager is of Enigma FC did a fantastic job. I mean, that team, I think, at the season's end will win it. So I'll start there. Just the amount of quality players who are younger relative to the rest of the division, I think, is going to help. Not to discount Blue Stars, I think they're always going to be there. Orange had obviously a fantastic season last year that culminated in a victory in the final. So they'll be right there in the mix. I think just looking at Soho's roster today, I was surprised at some last minute names on there that are good. So, I think those are your clear top four when it's all said and done. I don't know really much about Aztecas minus a few names, here and there, but everybody basically says the same thing. You can't overlook them. So I'm sure they'll be in the mix for a playoff spot. West United seems to have the commitment and, the talent as well. Azuri is an interesting one because I believe most of those guys would play between Tesla and Azuri. Now most of them they're all playing pretty much for Azuri. So I think you'll see a bigger commitment there. I don't know. I think it's a pretty decent division, top to bottom. I don't really know too much about goats, so by default, I'll say that they're going to be towards the bottom of the league. But you know what? Like, I think it's going in a good direction. I like the fact, to your point, Mike, about lifting the cap on the players. Maybe at some point there comes a time where the league grows enough, say 16 teams or so, where you can split it 8 and 8 into like a flight A and a flight B, and therefore like the restrictions don't matter at all. You can have a competitive division and a recreational division, and therefore everybody's happy. So yeah, I think it's going in the right direction.
Ben, you entered a team there. Was the thought like it was just time to move over there in terms of that versus Sunday League? I know you're still playing in Sunday, but is, like what was the idea there? I guess for you.
Just trying to get myself as much exercise as possible, Schieber.
Fair enough.
No, that's sort of a joke, but also sort of true. Um, so Ricky Martinez, Brandon Lonkar, and I, for a long time have, kind of talked about this, and it seems like, injury concerns, maybe with both of them, are in some ways, making this a little difficult. And I think I would be hesitant to say Enigma is the favorites right now. And this is coming from literally the person who is running Enigma. Um, it's hard to bring a team together continuity wise. I think, especially if you drop points early, I think we'll be a good team. I think we'll be top half of the table. But there's other teams that I think, are really good. I'm concerned about West United. I think West United has really built a pretty good team. Um, I also think, like I think Brian said, Soho got better, especially recently. I think bringing Ryan D'Annunzio on, Ryan Mangano being able to play, or Mangano playing some games. I think it's kind of a crapshoot, honestly. I think Orange, is well put together. They'll be organized. They'll be hard to beat. They'll have guys who can, play the roles that they need to play. Aztecas are really hard to play against. As somebody who's played against Aztecas for a long time, they just play differently than a lot of teams. They put you under pressure. They're just constantly running at you. And like if you show up with 12 guys, Aztecas are really hard to play against. And it's just scenarios like that where, any given Friday, could be um, a game where if you're not prepared, you lose. And I think maybe that's becoming the beauty of the over 35 division. And I think there is, you know, not a ton of parity there. I think there is kind of a clear cut, bottom, group of teams and a pretty clear
Hmm.
cut top group of teams. But in the mid range, there are teams there that I think, there are teams that can beat the Enigmas and can beat the Blue Stars and can beat Orange, if those teams are short on numbers or are whatever. I think there's enough of volatility among results where you might see some strange ones this year.
Let's just bump right up the next division into D4. Of course, with the split in the divisions from last year, we extended. We're now down to six on Sundays. Our new D4. I really like actually the makeup of this one this year. Maybe it's a bit top heavy, but I think the teams who have a legit chance at the trophy at the end of the year all look pretty intriguing. All teams who maybe in any other year would be a good team in say like D2, or something like that. So, any thoughts on the D3 as a whole? I think we would all probably point to the same team as a favorite in JL Dutch, but maybe the best challenger for them for the D4 title.
I think it's actually a pretty good. I mean, people may look at D4 and be like, "Whoa, new division, lower, probably not much talent." You look around these rosters and there's a lot of guys who played at higher levels. It's just a matter of how, invested. Are they there to have a good time after the game and maybe go to whatever their sponsor is, or is there like what's on the line, I guess, for them? And there's talented. You look at a lot of these teams. I mean, you mentioned JL Dutch, and the JL Dutch, a lot of these guys have played together for a really long time, and that's an advantage. Um, Meerkats, tons of former like Premier and Championship players who just have kind of, over the course of time, dropped down a bit. You have guys on Infinity who are really quality players who are just a little bit older. You have, Queen City Cosmos, a team that, I think will be competitive. I don't know. I just don't think it's quite as cut and dry with JL Dutch being the top team as you might think, but I do think there is a pretty stark difference between the top half of fourth and the bottom half of fourth.
Brian,
Yeah, I would
your thoughts?
agree. Yeah, Dutch would probably be the safe pick to start at the top because I think they elected to go down. So they didn't even belong in this division in the first place. So I'll say, they're number one by default until we see otherwise. But, it's a broken record how many times we say, Meerkats in this division. But like every year I look at their roster and I can't understand why they, win a game 8-2 and then the next week they lose 6-4. It just makes no sense to me. But it could be to Ben's point where there's just like how invested are the big names on these teams. But I will say there's a first time name on that team who's going to make a difference, I think, defensively, and that's Mac Blumen. That's a quality roster. And right now it looks like they're running a pretty thin roster, so maybe there's some more moves to come. Right now, I think they sit at 19. So either they are committed and they want to roll with a smaller number, and that's a good sign, or maybe they have some other heavy hitters coming along the way. But those top two teams, or those are my top two teams. I would place one of them, 1A and 1B. After that, there's a youth movement down here, so things are looking a little differently. The current D3, and I know we'll get to it next, seems to be older than this division, so things are changing. Infinity seems to be strong enough and committed enough, so I would think that they're going to, be somewhere in that third to fourth place spot once the fixtures are all set at the end of the season. I also do like Queen City Cosmos from an individual standpoint. Like there's names like George Yapa in this division. I mean, he doesn't belong in this division personally, but I don't know like why he's there. I couldn't tell you. Is he there because he's going to play a lot? I don't know. Or is he going to show up for two games? So those names might not matter all that much. So they're a hard one for me to really feel good about. And then you got Bangarang. I know they've made an effort to get younger. We'll see how that plays out. I'm not really too familiar with their names, but perhaps there's some good cohesion there. And then there's some teams that I just think, unfortunately, will end up towards the bottom. I'm very unfamiliar with South Buffalo, so I'll put them there. Big Green, I think, got a little bit worse, maybe. I don't know. I guess I'd put them towards the bottom. Rust Belt, unfortunately, probably down there. Although I think somebody said they're not going to finish last, so big moves coming from Rust
I
Belt.
think they've said that like every season in the lead up to it, and they've found themselves down around that. I do like your point here that there are a lot of names that we've seen in the higher divisions that have found homes here in D4. I think you could have certainly looked at the division split and just said, "Oh, D4 is going to get a lot worse," and I think it's kind of the opposite. I think for some reason that division has gotten better in terms of quality from the teams. I think if we were to have not have split, a lot of these teams probably would have been moved up into like D2, and we would have had a thicker D2. So I think it's really intriguing what's going on down there in the lowest division in BDSL Sunday, and it's intriguing for all the right reasons. In that I think the competition level is going to be raised, and I think there's a good group of good teams there who can threaten for the trophy this year. Um, the one team I did just want to bring up real quick was Celtic Classic. Anything but classic after their roster dropped. Pretty much a group of kids. Maybe if they didn't have their elder statesman there, they'd probably be the youngest team in the BDSL by a wide margin. Um, just a really strange pivot for them that will probably catch a lot of teams who aren't familiar, with checking rosters and stuff like that off guard. So they're a team I might have an eye on who could start hot. And then maybe peter out later once the bigger bodies, start imposing their will maybe a little bit against the younger kids. But I just wanted to bring them up as like that sort of came out of nowhere. I don't think I heard a whisper about that being the case for them at all. I know in the past they've added one or two younger kids, but this year it was like a total rebirth for that organization down
And
there.
and really surprising too, because Celtic Old Boys folded out of over 35. So I guess the natural thing, at least I thought, would be that that team would kind of slide over into over 35 and
Yeah, I
maybe
agree.
get stronger from that perspective. Older guys, but like a bigger, stronger core of older guys.
Yeah, I thought the exact same thing. As soon as old boys didn't sign up, I said, "Oh, I guess they're all moving back to Sundays," and that was certainly not the case when the roster came out. Um, let's go to D3 here. D3. Uh, there's got to be a division every year, I guess, that I'm like maybe least excited to look forward to. And if I'm totally honest, it's D3. Honestly, there's just no standout club in this. It might be the fact that like there's so many I guess I'll say like middling teams from years past here. My personal favorite entering the season is Lakeshore. I like the construction there. I think they're very familiar with each other, so should be a lot of continuity. Their manager Bryce is a BDSL veteran. He's been doing this for a while, so I think they're my favorite. You could point to the rebranded United Warriors as a good club to expect good things out of there. But aside from those two, like I don't know, just not nothing really moving the dial for me in terms of excitement level. I really hope that changes during the year. Um, am I being a Debbie Downer on it? What are your guys' thoughts on the D3 this year?
Well, Mike, have you ever seen the movie Trolls?
Yes, I have.
All
I
right,
have.
so you know what the Bergens are, right?
I do. Yes.
This division is the Bergens. It's like so, and the way I feel this way because last year we went through that whole split of Division Two, and basically made a good Division Two and a bad Division Two, and the bad Division Two is now named Division Three. I guess that's how this division made up itself. So I feel like I just get the sense of like, oh, it's soccer again. We're down a division, even though they're really not. Um, but like aside from that point. I think a lot of people are overlooking Medina. I think they've gotten a lot better, actually, if you actually look at their roster, and I expect good things from them. I think this is the year where they can catapult to the top of the division. I think, in my mind, they're number one, maybe United Warriors, probably number two. Um, I think Tonawanda, I know they got dropped two divisions. They might be headed to D4 at this point. Um, and you know what? Like, I think I always discount Moby Ducks because I really don't know too much of them other than Corey McCarthy, but they could be struggling too. There's not. I don't really know the division too well. It looks like Youngstown had a complete overhaul, so maybe they look like a Newport team of recent years. NWO, they're I think Thundercats basically in over 35. Ben, correct me if I'm wrong. Um,
Right. They're sort of
so
Kingsmen too.
Yeah, the former Kingsman. I don't know. To me, there's one or two teams I feel most safe about, and it would be Medina and United Warriors, probably Lakeshore and Buffalo Cosmos after that.
Yeah, I wish I had something more interesting to offer here, and I don't really. I agree with United Warriors. I agree with Lakeshore as two of the contenders. I look at the Buffalo Cosmos roster and I see a team that is also a contender. Um, there you would love to see Ukraine do well this year. I would obviously love to see Ukraine do well this year. I
Yep.
don't know too much about the makeup of the team, but just that's a team I'll be rooting for. I think. Other than that, it isn't an exciting division to me, and I've looked at kind of up and down now, and I unfortunately am not that excited either.
I think
Maybe it'll
it's
change.
I think it's just because like these teams, as we said, like they just have not been names in the playoffs before. Like we just don't, we have not seen this group, um, you know, that often. And if we have, it's been like old history. Western New York United Reds way back in the day. Just not a lot of recent success for most of these clubs. I
I
mean,
mean,
in a way, that's probably good for them being in this division where they have a chance to maybe truly shine a little bit, show off their talents, and have a successful year. Not that like I wouldn't say these teams are unsuccessful. It's just they've kind of been stuck in no man's land in the divisions that they were in, and now they'll just have a chance to really brand themselves a little bit as being, a good team that can compete, or a team that, like, this is just their level, I suppose.
I agree.
Well, now's the time, Mike.
Yeah.
Now's the time. I mean, minus Cosmos, who actually won a title last year. I don't think any of these teams have really hoisted a championship either ever or in recent memory.
Reds have one. Didn't Medina make a final? They got promoted one time, but I can't remember if
They
they made the
won.
final.
They won the bottom division, which was Division
Okay.
Three. I don't think they even made the final. If
Okay.
I'd have to double check. Tonawanda United might have won something years ago too.
It's a division of opportunity, I would say. I think,
Yep.
there's such a pack here that one team sticks out, makes some noise and is a threat next year in D2. And it'll be interesting to see what team that is because I don't know right now.
Yeah. I don't want to act like we're dumping on them, but it's just that's the case, and I think in a lot of ways it's kind of good for them to be able to sort of like break out of that sort of middle of the road kind of path that they've all sort of been on. Um, we'll go slide right up to D2 next year. I think an intriguing field, maybe the best new team entering BDSL this year with Rance FC, a totally rebuilt FC Lackawanna, and some other very, very good BDSL clubs in here: Southern Tier, Revolution, Great White Buffalo. Um, is there a team you guys have pegged as a favorite inside second division?
Yeah. Clear favorite. I've got FC Lackawanna. So, for those who don't know, this is basically FK Bosna of last year on steroids. It's all of the contributors from that team last year, minus Mateo, which obviously is a big name. But then it's some of the remainders that were at FC Lackawanna, plus a couple other people who have moved down from Premier. That team looks to be a wrecking ball. I think they're going to win the division comfortably. I think they'll win. I think they're going to come away with a double at the bare minimum this year, in my opinion. But it won't come easy because this division is fun. This whole division looks like pretty solid. And again, these are the teams that were more successful in recent years because these were the winners of last year, so to speak, in D2. So now you've got a crew of teams who know how to win, who've been doing it lately. So I really think there's a lot of pride here. It's a good division, top to bottom, and to me, it reminds me of Championship, where without FC Lackawanna in that picture, because I do think they'll win most of their games, if not all. The rest of them, I think, are going to compete week in and week out. Southern Tier is really good, good on paper at the bare minimum. Revolution might have lost like a key piece or two, but they seem to always replace that really well. So I don't expect them to be falling from the graces that quickly. So they should be in the playoff mix. Great White Buffalo, probably the same thing. It looks like they're doing enough to tweak every year to stay relevant in the top half of the division that they're in. Hamburg is good. They keep every year. It seems to be more and more of a like an FC feel of the past few years. So they're competent. Rants. I know they're Clarence based. I'm rooting for them. I think they're good. Um, I don't know. It's the first year. They might need to get used to the physicality. So they could drop a couple games here and there. It wouldn't surprise me. Up until maybe a week ago, I thought Blitz had a really good shot at being at the top, very top of this division, but it looks like many of those guys went over to greener pastures as part of the Kilimanjaro Bandits. And Devils is interesting because they've got a good nucleus, but they lost all of the Montantes. That might hurt a lot. So we'll see. And any other team I didn't mention, I think they'll probably be closer to the bottom. Maybe LaSalle could end up being at the very bottom by default, just because they finished sixth last year, I think, in the Northern Division Two league. And I don't know if they've done enough to really get that much better. So I guess I'll place them in last.
I'm sort of on the Revolution bandwagon right now. I maybe losing a couple key pieces, but there's enough there's a couple Pendleton guys. You have people who've played at a high level recently. As a club as a whole, they've had success recently. They brought in one of the best players who grew up in this area, and Andy Schwert, who hasn't played in the BDSL, I don't know if ever, but in a long time. Another fantastic player. I think Sam Wagner maybe is the best player in the division. I don't know. There's just a lot of there's enough talent on Revolution where I would say, sure, FC Lackawanna is the favorite, and I think Rance is the wild card because it's not always easy to play well in your first year in BDSL. And I know there's probably some familiarity with each other, just, obviously all being from Clarence or many of them from Clarence. But adjusting to the BDSL, I think, is a little different. It's one thing to play, high school or club, and another to play against, angry 30-year-old men. And that's what they're going to be up against. And so, I mean, Revolution, FC Lackawanna, I agree. Those are probably the two. Devils losing the Montantes, huge storyline in the division. Southern tier, maybe slightly upper half. But, other than that, I agree with Brian, I guess. FC Lackawanna, team to beat. I like Revolution. Rance, not sure about yet.
I think sort of the flip side of what we mentioned in D3, where a lot of those teams now have a chance to shine. It'll be interesting for some of these clubs because they've never really had bad seasons before. I look at this list, and there are a few teams on this who have really experienced like a really rough season, and even if they have, it's definitely not with the collection of players that I see looking at the rosters. Like FC Lackawanna has had bad seasons before, but this group of players have never seen that. Probably, well, they have on other teams, but like I think when they joined this squad and made it, they thought this is going to be a really good team. So I think there's a lot of interesting things at play here with the split, just in terms of teams who have had success and haven't at the same time. And I think that sort of plays in an opposite direction as what we talked about in the third division there. The last one we got D1, and I think it rightfully so. It's kind of in between maybe what the excitement I have in D2 and the blah kind of feeling I get when I look at D3. Um, a good group of maybe top half teams in my opinion here, and then a group of less exciting teams at the bottom half. In my mind, the top four is like crystal clear. It's going to be really hard for any of those teams to break into it. The only thing, of course, that's going to give me pause in saying that is the status of Bandits and how their other league aspirations kind of pull them. Will they have the same sort of effect as Lackawanna faced last year? I kind of think that might happen. So we'll see there. But aside from that, it's Willie's, it's Crimson, and it's Bandits, and who's the team I'm forgetting here? Mezque. Yep. In my mind, it's those four clear teams. I think you can make an argument that if you inserted those four into championship and maybe took out what you would think the bottom four championship teams are, it would be like the most insane championship division ever in terms of parity. So I think it's those four are bust. Sadly for the rest of the teams there. It's not to say there aren't some talented teams there. Like I do kind of like the makeup of FC Quake this year versus last year. I know they had some standout players who didn't make a lot of games, and I think that might be different this time around for them. But do you guys feel the same? I have to imagine you both do after looking at those teams that it's these four and then sort of the rest of the field.
Yeah, being a part of this division, I want to say Buffalo Celtic is gonna build
Surprise some
off
teams maybe, right?
is gonna build off its excellent cup run in Teal Cup last year, which was mostly a boon from the schedule that we got. Let's just throw that out there. But no, I mean, Schieber, you're right. It's going to be a really good playoffs this year, and it's going to be those last four teams that you mentioned that are going to be in it, I think. And I don't know even who pushes those top four. I think Cheektowaga, which is kind of a newly formed team that is a collection of Rangers guys and some of the some of the guys from the Cheektowaga team that was previously in D2, I think is actually kind of an interesting team. I don't know how well they'll gel, but I think they'll play pretty hard and be a little bit better than people expect. I don't think a team's going to score more than Crimson's going to score this year. Crimson's going to score a ton of goals, and anybody who has to try to mark them is just going to be, in a fit of misery. Kilimanjaro, so much pace that you're just, your head's going to be spinning that whole game. And by you, I mean me, because my head will be spinning that entire game. Nobody come watch that game, please. Best K, I think, will be good. I wonder how much just given those the players on that team's commitments elsewhere, can sometimes they can beat Inter in a cup game, and then they might have 10 guys show up during the week or on a weekend. You never know. I think that the most questions of the top four is with Mesque, but I do agree that they're, as far as roster makeup goes, a top four team. Beyond that, yeah, I think there are some reasons to be more excited with Buffalo Celtic this year. I still think we're a mid-table team. They're probably not even listening this far anyhow, so here we are.
Yeah, you're probably in that middle range there, but I wouldn't write yourselves off. I think you've got a good core of players on your team. You guys and Quake, I kind of have like interchanged right now in that 5 to 6 range. Both teams that could, make the playoffs. I think the other two teams that might make a push to the playoffs are Delco or Celtic 1888. But I just don't see, to me, this is going to sound so bad, but I don't mean it in this way, but they seem very vanilla to me, where there's just not enough pop or something. There's something missing in general there to really get them over the edge. The bottom three, in no particular order for me, is Stingrays, Outlaws, and Honey Badgers. I've never seen the Honey Badgers ever. So, like, I still to this day, I don't think they exist. So I'm always going to put them down there at the bottom. I've never seen their uniforms. I've never been like on a field with them at the same time. I think I only know one of their names, Mike Gant. I think it's the only name I know. So, yeah, they're in the bottom as a result of that. Top four, I'm also in agreement with you guys. I think Willies are comfortably four. So they're the ones that I think could slide closer to the middle of the pack, where versus the top. And I think it's because they're they're an interesting makeup to me. You've got some guys with some premier experience, but I wouldn't say they're all household names. And then you've got the Junior Willies team that did pretty well in the bottom division last year. I thought we were going to come out of that division, but didn't, so it kind of surprised me. But they've got a couple names from that group that are getting better and are entering that like college age where altogether I'm sure it'll be fine, but I don't think they can compete at the same level as Mesque, even if they are missing some guys. And to your point, it would come down to commitment on Sundays. And I think what Ben's alluding to is this team has a lot of Western New York flash relationships and coaches on this team. So depending on where they're at, if they're out of town or whatnot, maybe they're missing some key players there. So Mesque for me is probably third as a result of that. Crimson is probably my number one. And the reason is because of what Mike alluded to initially with Kilimanjaro having to juggle two different leagues at once. I think that's going to hurt Kilimanjaro early on in the season. But because there are so many games that they could probably win regardless, they're going to be fine. And when it comes down to it at the end of the year, I believe the Bandits will win another trophy. But Crimson, with some incredible ads, the fact that they still have Whitman Hernandez must mean that there's something really gelling in that group there because he's a name that I would have assumed by now would have been plucked, but he's not. And kudos to him too, by the way. Like it's nice to see some of these teams actually stay together and not jump for greener pastures. So that's a team that's getting younger in the right spots. I mean, they added Bird, Luca. There's a couple guys there that are going to really help them on a team that was already pretty solid.
Yeah, I really think the battle at the top this year might be one of the best ones we've seen, even in recent. Those teams are just so close together. Mezque maybe has the best like individual players, but how does that work with the rest of a younger roster, with them maybe a touch older than the rest of the group? Um, Man, I would put Bandits at 4. Honestly, I know I see your points about Willies, but I just feel like I don't think that they're gonna have the same success that they saw in D2, coming up to D1. I just think teams in D1 are going to be more prepared. I think this division is going to be high scoring all over the place. Like defense is going to be at a very low minimum. It's why I'm kind of worried about a team like Delco who has like really struggled to score goals. They've played a really nice defensive brand of soccer, but can they keep like the numerous names of really talented offensive players across this division at bay? It's going to be very interesting. Ben, you brought up Cheektowaga there. I'm curious, why do you favor them a little bit? I know there's been people who have said that they don't expect them to do very well. It's a mix of the old Cheektowaga and the Rangers, who were both not very good clubs um, last season in their respective divisions. Um, what what gives you hope that that team might have more success than people are giving them credit for?
I don't think they're going to be top four.
Sure, sure.
I just don't think they'll necessarily be relegated. And I think a lot of people are positioning them as, look at this new team, a combination of two teams that, were essentially holding on, to their existences. Um, I just think the collection of players, I think that team will play hard. I think their challenge will be just making sure they get enough numbers from week to week. But, there's players there with a history of, Jimmy Nesper can be a really good center back. Dom Parisi has scored a lot of goals in the BDSL. There are several Wiegans, one of which is a very, very good goalie, and like having a goalie can make a huge difference, in the
Right.
BDSL if he saves you a goal a game or whatever. They have a couple, younger guys. Even Wahid from Damon is a legitimate Division II soccer player. You look down the roster and it's not barren. It's not a team that's going to crack the top four, but it's not barren by any means. The division gets interesting in week one. I mean, on Sunday at 4 o'clock, Willys and Kilimanjaro play each other at Buff State. That will immediately give you a sense of, what's the pecking order here a little bit. And I don't
Yeah.
know. Looking at Crimson's early season schedule, week two they get Kilimanjaro. So Kilimanjaro plays Willys and then Crimson, and that will, you know, if Kilimanjaro goes in and 0-2 hole, then maybe there's concern. But I think there's a good chance that Kilimanjaro comes out of that 2-0, and then the rest of the division is looking up at them.
Hmm.
Yeah, and actually, Mike, I'm actually curious.
Yeah.
I know you put Kilimanjaro fourth and you put Mesquite ahead of them. I'm wondering why that, just based on the fact that they just played each other in a title game with all players there, all players that mattered, and the Bandits won pretty comfortably. So what would make you say that Mesquite is more suited now in this division than Bandits are?
I just think that I think Mezke is the best individual player in Jordan, Araujo. I think they they did lose that game, but I remember watching that game and thinking like neither team really stood out as maybe being a better club versus the other one. And again, I'm just very worried, similar to how Lackawanna fared in their first attempt at two league soccer, that they're just going to get pulled in two different directions. Um, the full attention might not be on BDSL versus UPSL, and I don't think. I mean, that's a team that if they get rattled and going in the wrong way for whatever reason, could snowball quickly. In my opinion. Um, and Mezke maybe has more composure. We mentioned that they're a roster made up of coaches and players. So like that's a group who isn't going to be maybe as phased if they drop a game or two here, because they have leaders on that team who can kind of pick the rest of them up. And I'm just not confident enough in Bandits that if they do face adversity, which I expect them to at some point this season, versus last year, which went relatively smooth for them, that they'll be able to, like, I guess, pick themselves back up, and get them, or keep them in the right direction in terms of a title threat. Um, could Bandits beat Mezque? For sure. I mean, to me, it's crystal clear that those four teams are the top. I haven't talked about how good Crimson is because you guys have done a great job. I mean, that team is loaded. I said Mezque, in my opinion, has the best individual player. Whitman is probably number two, no question about it. Um, it's really surprising that he's there with Crimson. So credit to Mitch for being able to keep him there, because I'm sure there were premier teams sniffing around and seeing if he might want to make a jump. Um, but I guess that's just my view on Bandits. I'm just going to be leery of any team that tries to do the two league thing until I've seen it successful. Um, there's a reason why the FC Buffalo reserves maybe weren't a huge success, and that they've done a better job of spreading their players out amongst the BDSL. Sure, a couple more have, or a couple teams have a bigger contingency of them, but I think it's sort of better for them to be spread out a bit. And when you have basically a full team in both, it's going to be tough in my opinion. And maybe I'm wrong on that. I'll admit I don't really look at the UPSL rosters or anything like that. So I'm kind of just assuming there's going to be crossover. So I could be wrong. And if I am wrong, then I would say the team might be watered down from it. Um,
You know
because
what's
I,
really difficult
I
to find is the UPSL rosters.
I don't want to start dragging another league
No,
on
no.
the
You,
on the.
Mike, that was actually a really good answer. You had some good points in there.
Mhm. So yeah, but all told, I think the top four is pretty clear that we agree on. The middle pack is pretty tight too. We didn't even talk about Outlaws at all coming up. I think they will probably struggle in the. I mean, they got throttled pretty badly by FK Bosnia in that championship game. I don't know in the lead up to this season if they did enough to really improve the team to really like stake a claim for multiple seasons here, but we'll see. But I'm pretty excited for the battle at the top in D1 and to see how it plays out over the course of the season.
No one will ever recover from a final that went that way.
No,
I could not believe what I was watching.
it was pretty rough to watch while it was happening. Well, we did it. We made it through all. It was even a little bit longer than what we maybe expected before it, but definitely fun to go over and hit all of the divisions here with you guys. I just want to say thanks for both of you for stopping in and talking about all of them here with us this evening. Always good stuff from both of you. I'm sure I'll be asking you and bothering you to come back on throughout the season, so hopefully we'll be welcoming you guys back on the cast again this year.
Thank you. Yeah, it was fun to be on as usual.
Yeah, I had a great time.
Perfect. All right, guys. Well, that's going to do it for us here. Thanks for joining us here on Twitch tonight. It was a lot of fun. After this, I'll be posting it to YouTube where everyone can watch it there. Um, it's going to be a great season of soccer kicking off this weekend. Ruse versus Italia, game of the week, I think, from rumors. So turn out there at Nichols. Um, but aside from that, good luck. I do want to say good luck to our last remaining team in Regional Cup play. They head out to Philadelphia, not this Saturday, but the following Saturday. So good luck to them and repping the league. And for everyone else, enjoy the season. Best of luck to you guys out um, on the fields on Sundays. But thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the podcast. Thanks, guys.